Michael sat before the glowing screen, his proposal ready. He had spent months refining every slide, calculating every projection, and practicing the cadence of his pitch until he could deliver it in his sleep. His pulse was steady as he walked into the boardroom. He stood at the head of the long, polished table, meeting the gaze of the lead investor. He spoke for 10 minutes. He articulated the vision, the market gap, and the path to growth. He finished, the silence in the room heavy with anticipation. The investor did not lean forward. He did not ask for the spreadsheets. He simply closed the folder, pushed it across the table, and shook his head. "Not this time," the man said. The door clicked shut behind Michael seconds later. He stood in the hallway, the sound of the latch echoing in his ears. The air in the corridor felt colder than the room he had just left. This was the first no. It was not a conversation. It was a termination of hope. He looked at his watch, realized the entire future he had envisioned had vanished in less than a quarter of an hour, and turned toward the exit. The first rejection was an anomaly. The second was an inconvenience. By the 10th, the pattern began to solidify into a wall. Michael returned to his desk every evening. His inbox, a graveyard of polite, automated declines. Each email notification sound triggered a tightening in his chest, a physical sting that lingered long after he closed the laptop. He watched the count climb past 15, then 20. The momentum he had carried into the first meeting had long since evaporated, replaced by a heavy, static exhaustion. He sat in his office late into the night, the only light coming from the harsh glow of the monitor. Outside, the city moved in a blur of motion, but inside, everything was stagnant. The silence of the room was absolute, pressing against his ears, amplifying every doubt he had ever harbored about his vision. He stared at the growing stack of printouts, his fingers tracing the edges of decline letters. The air felt thin. He had built his entire identity around this proposal, and now, with each passing day, the project felt less like a bridge to the future and more like a tomb he was building for himself. Every shadow in the corner of the room seemed to mock the effort he had poured into his work. Michael reached for a weathered book resting on the corner of his desk. His fingers traced the spine before he opened it to a marked page. He read the words aloud, the sound cutting through the oppressive stillness of the room. Most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. He let the book drop onto the desk. He looked at the pile of declined emails, then at his messy, handwritten notes. A shift occurred. He stopped looking at the rejections as dead ends. He pulled a fresh sheet of paper and began to draw a grid. He labeled the columns with the names of the investors who had sent him away. Beside each name, he wrote exactly what they had questioned, what they had challenged, and where their interest had waned. The stack of emails was no longer a monument to his failure. It was a data set. He started cross-referencing their critiques. He saw the pattern. The 10th investor had questioned his cost per acquisition. The 20th had flagged his logistics timeline. He circled these points in red ink. The wall he had been hitting was not a barrier, but a blueprint. He stood up, moved to the whiteboard, and began to map his path forward, one critique at a time. Michael became a student of his own shortcomings. Every morning began with the same ritual. He scrutinized the latest decline email, extracted the critique, and attacked his product. He scraped away features that caused confusion and rebuilt his logistics model from the ground up. The whiteboard became his primary workspace, covered in layers of ink, corrections, and revised projections. But as he labored in the quiet, the world outside grew impatient. His phone buzzed during his deep work sessions, friends calling to suggest stable openings, family members checking in with voices heavy with concern. They spoke of safety, of long-term security, and of the wisdom in knowing when to walk away. Michael listened to their words while his hands worked, his grip tightening on his pen. He did not argue. He simply hung up, turned his phone to silent, and returned to the data. His kitchen table disappeared under a mountain of research materials, market analysis, and product drafts. Every no he received was no longer a personal strike. It was a variable he had not yet solved. He stopped counting the days. He focused only on the next iteration, carving his business into shape with the blunt force of constant, brutal feedback. He was building a bridge, and he refused to stop until it held his weight. The tally on his office wall reached 50. The number was written in heavy black ink, a stark reminder of every door that had stayed closed. With each passing rejection, The chatter from his social circle had quieted into an uncomfortable silence. Friends stopped asking about his progress. The invitations to dinner dried up. Michael found himself in a vacuum where only the business existed. He stopped viewing this isolation as a loss and started using it as a tool. Without the distraction of external expectations, his focus narrowed until it was absolute. He spent hours in front of the mirror, reciting his pitch until his voice lost its tremor and gained a steady, rhythmic cadence. He stopped reading from his notes. He walked the length of his office, pacing the floorboards, delivering his arguments to the empty air. He could explain the market shifts, the logistics, and the projected growth in his sleep. His hands moved with the pitch, emphasizing points he had once fumbled. He was no longer just presenting a business plan. He was reciting his own convictions. He knew every question an investor might ask before they even finished the sentence. He was ready for the next one, and the one after that, his resolve sharpening into something cold and precise. A new opportunity appeared on his screen, a major firm, the kind that could anchor his entire company. It was the break he had been hunting for. Michael cleared his desk of everything else, dedicating every waking hour to this singular pitch. He spent the first week modeling their specific needs, the second week stress testing his own projections, and the third week refining the delivery until his throat felt raw. He was no longer just preparing a presentation, he was building a fortress of logic. Yet, the pressure was different this time. The counts on his wall stood at 99. He stared at the number, his reflection in the glass showing a face etched with fatigue. He knew the math. 99 doors had already closed. If this one failed, it would be a century of rejection, a milestone of absolute failure. He practiced until his eyes burned, cycling through every possible objection, every potential flaw, and every counterargument. He lived in a state of hypervigilance, his pulse quickening whenever the phone pinged. He was terrified, but he didn't stop. He pushed through the exhaustion, locking himself in his office for days, convinced that if he could just find the right words, the next response would be the one that changed everything. The silence of the room was heavy, thick with the anticipation of the final, decisive test. The notification sound cut through the silence like a blade. Michael clicked the icon. The screen displayed 2 sentences. It was a rejection. The firm was not interested. He sat back, the chair groaning under his weight as he stared at the words. His hands began to shake, a fine, rhythmic tremor that traveled up his arms and settled in his chest. He turned his head toward the wall. The count was there. 100. The number seemed to pulse in the dim light of the monitor. He closed his eyes, but the figure remained burned into his vision. He pushed his keyboard aside, the plastic clattering against the desk, and let his arms hang limp at his sides. The ambition that had propelled him for a year suddenly felt like lead. He reached out and tapped the power button on his monitor. The room plunged into absolute darkness, save for the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through the blinds. He remained there, motionless, breathing in the cold, still air of the office. Every muscle in his body felt heavy, anchored by the weight of 100 failed attempts. The thought of walking away, of closing the laptop for the final time, became a tangible presence in the room. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply let the silence settle over him, waiting for the impulse to quit to take root. The darkness did not swallow him. Instead, the stillness sharpened his focus. Michael sat up, the chair legs scraping against the floor, a sound that cut through the silence of the office. He reached out and clicked his lamp back on. The light revealed the wall with the count, but he did not look at it. He walked to his desk, sat down, and opened a blank document. His fingers moved across the keys with a rhythm he had not possessed before. 101, he whispered to the empty room. The words were a quiet, firm contract with himself. He spent the next few weeks refining his pitch, stripping away the theoretical fluff and replacing it with the hard, jagged edges of what he had learned. He traveled to the next boardroom with a different stride. When he stepped through the heavy oak doors, he did not project the nervous energy of an eager novice. He stood in the center of the room, his posture grounded, his gaze steady. He began to speak, and his voice carried a weight that filled the space. He did not talk about dreams. He talked about the specific, brutal problems he had solved through the long months of trial and error. The air in the room shifted. The investors stopped looking at their papers and started looking at him. The lead investor leaned forward, tapping a pen against the mahogany table. He asked about the market volatility that had derailed Michael months ago. Michael did not hesitate. He moved to the whiteboard, drawing a clear, concise diagram of the problem and his specific solution. He spoke with a surgical precision that left no room for doubt. The investor paused, looked at his colleagues, and then back at Michael. The challenge had been met. Michael packed his laptop, the familiar weight of the bag feeling different now. He stepped out into the bright afternoon glare, his footsteps echoing on the pavement. He walked for 2 blocks, his pulse steady, his mind already calculating the next phase of development. Then, the vibration started. His phone buzzed against his leg, a sharp, insistent rhythm that broke the city noise. He pulled it from his pocket. A notification illuminated the screen. He stopped walking. The sender was the firm. He tapped the message, his thumb hovering for a heartbeat before he opened it. The words were simple, formal, and final. They were offering the partnership. He read them again, then locked the screen and tucked the phone away. He began to walk again, the path forward finally clear. Years later, the office lights were bright and artificial, reflecting off the glass table between Michael and the reporter. The camera lens stared, unblinking. The reporter leaned forward, tapping his notebook. "How did you handle the 100 rejections?" he asked. Michael did not look at the cameras. He leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table. His fingers spread. The movement was deliberate, calm. "I stopped counting failures and started counting lessons," he said. The room went silent. The air seemed to thin. He did not talk about luck. He did not talk about the surge of capital that followed the partnership. He talked about the decision to show up for the 101st time. He looked at the reporter, his gaze unwavering. "Success is not a single yes," he said, his voice low and steady. "It is the culmination of every no that forced me to grow." The reporter lowered his pen. The technicians behind the cameras held their breath. In that quiet, the weight of the years behind him was visible in the set of his jaw and the stillness of his hands. He had turned the rejections into a foundation, and the story was complete.